Reverend Swain wrote this 1912 tale after 6 years as chaplain at King's College, Cambridge, where he was close friends with the Dean, the master ghost story writer M.R. James. Every Christmas Eve, James would read a brand new chiller aloud in a candlelit study. Swain was in the tiny audience, laughing at the jump scares and admiring the craft. When he moved to the Fens to become vicar of Stoneground, he tried the same game, publishing 9 clerical hauntings as the Stoneground Ghost Tales and dedicating the book to M.R. James, the indulgent parent of such tastes as these pages indicate. Bone to His Bone is Swain's warmest echo of James's The Tractate Middeth. Both stories open in a midnight library, where an antique book flips itself to cryptic lines that send the protagonist digging for a buried relic. Yet Swain shifts the mood from terror to charity. Instead of a dust-caked revenant, we meet a long-dead vicar who wants one stray arm bone returned to sacred ground. Read it when moonlight cuts the room in half, and note the small comic touches. The immovable spade, the vicar's fuss over digging exactly 5 spadefuls that keep the story human even as it nods to Jamesian dread. In Swain's hands, the ghost tale becomes a quiet Christmas homily. The living and the dead can rest easy once every book and every bone is back in its rightful place. So draw the curtains, pour something warming, and step into the library at Stoneground. Bone to His Bone by E G Swain and read by Chris Halton. William Whitehead, Fellow of Emmanuel College in the University of Cambridge, became Vicar of Stoneground in 1731. The annals of his incumbency were doubtless short and simple. They have not survived. In his day, there were no newspapers to collect gossip and no parish magazines to record the small events of parochial life. One event, however, then momentous, is still recorded in 2 places. After 23 years of work, Vicar Whitehead failed in health and journeyed to Bath in what his monument calls the vain hope of being restored. The length of his stay is unknown. It is reasonable to suppose he travelled in summer, but by November his physician told him to lay aside all hope of recovery. Then the patient's thoughts turned to the comfortable, straggling vicarage he had left at Stoneground, where he had hoped to end his days. He prayed that his successor might be as happy there as he himself had been. Setting his affairs in order, as became one who had but a short time to live, he executed a will bequeathing to the vicars of Stoneground for ever the close of the ground he had recently purchased because it lay next the vicarage garden, and by a codicil he added to the bequest his library of books. Within a few days William Whitehead was gathered to his fathers. A mural tablet in the north aisle of the church records in Latin his services and his benefactions, his 2 marriages, and his fruitless journey to Bath. The house he loved but never again saw was pulled down 40 years later and rebuilt by Vicar James Deavy. The garden, with Whitehead's close of ground and other adjacent lands, was opened out and planted a little before 1850 by Vicar Robert Towerson. The aspect of everything has changed, but in a convenient chamber on the first floor of the present vicarage, the library of Vicar Whitehead stands very much as he used and loved it, and as he bequeathed it to his successors forever. The books are arranged as he arranged and ticketed them. Little slips of paper, sometimes bearing interesting fragments of writing, still mark his places. His marginal comments still give life to pages from which every other interest has faded, and only a dull imagination could sit in the chamber amidst these volumes without being carried back nearly 2 centuries to the time when the newest of them left the printer's hands. Of those into whose possession the books have come, some have doubtless loved them more and some less. Some perhaps have left them severely alone, but none have lost them, and they passed some century and a half after William Whitehead's death into the hands of Mr. Batchel, who loved them as a father loves his children. Living alone and with a few domestic cares to distract his mind, he could enjoy to the full what Vicar Whitehead had enjoyed so long before. Many a long summer evening he sat poring over forgotten books, and since the chamber, otherwise called the library, faced south, he could also spend sunny winter mornings there without discomfort. Writing at a small table or reading as he stood at a tall desk, he browsed among the books like an ox in a pleasant pasture. There were other times, too, when Mr. Batchel used the library. Not being a sound sleeper, book-loving men seldom are, he occupied one of the 2 bedrooms that opened directly into it. The arrangement enabled him to beguile many a sleepless hour among the books, and in view of these nocturnal visits, he kept a candle in a wall sconce above the desk and matches ready to his hand. One disadvantage accompanied this close proximity of bed to library. Owing apparently to some defect in the fittings, never investigated by the mechanically indifferent Mr. Batchel, there could be heard in the stillness of night exactly such sounds as might arise from a person moving about among the books. Visitors using the other adjoining room would often remark at breakfast that they had heard their host in the library at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning when, in fact, he had not left his bed. Invariably, Mr. Batchel allowed them to think he had been where they imagined. He disliked idle controversy and was unwilling to open the door to supernatural talk. Knowing well enough the noises by which his guests had been deceived, he wanted no explanation beyond his own, though it was too vague to count as an explanation. He conjectured that the window sashes, the doors, or something were defective, and was too phlegmatic and unpractical to investigate. The matter gave him no concern. People whose sleep is uncertain are apt to have their worst nights when they most desire their best. Consciousness of a special need for rest brings enough mental disturbance to forbid it. So on Christmas Eve 1907, Mr. Batchel, who wished to sleep well in view of Christmas Day's labours, lay hopelessly awake. He exhausted all known devices for courting slumber, and at last found himself wider awake than ever. A brilliant moon shone into his room, for he hated window blinds. A light wind blew, and the sounds in the library were more than usually suggestive of someone moving about. He almost determined to have the sashes seen to, although he seldom had anything seen to. He disliked changes, even for the better, and would submit to great inconvenience rather than alter things with which he had grown familiar. While he revolved these matters, he heard the clock strike midnight. Abandoning all hope of sleep, he rose, put on a vast dressing gown that hung ready for such occasions, and passed into the library, intending to read himself drowsy if he could. The moon had left the south, and the library, by contrast with the moonlit bedroom, seemed doubly dark. Nothing was visible but 2 blue-grey window panes against the sky. The furniture was lost in shadow. Groping to the table, Mr. Batchel felt for the matches that usually lay there. The table, however, was cleared of everything. He raised his right hand to feel for a shelf where matches were sometimes mislaid, and at that moment the matchbox was gently put into it. Such an incident could hardly fail to disturb even a phlegmatic man. "Who's this?" he cried nervously. No answer. He struck a light, looked hastily round, and found the room empty as ever. Everything in its accustomed place, but no other person than himself. It is not quite accurate to say everything was as usual. Upon the tall desk lay a quarto volume that he certainly had not placed there. His practice was to replace books on their shelves after use, and his library habits were precise. A book out of place was both an offence against good order and a sign that his privacy had been intruded upon. With some surprise he lit the candle in the sconce and examined the volume, glad in his disturbed condition to have an occupation. The book was unfamiliar to him, making it certain some other hand had removed it. Its title ran The Complete Gardener of Monsieur de la Quintigne, made English by John Evelyn, Esquire. It consisted of divers reflections on husbandry, doubtless entertaining but too discursive for practical use. He had never opened it, and growing restless, told himself that some boy with the run of the house had taken it down hoping for pictures. Yet even as he framed the excuse, he felt its weakness. The desk was too high for a boy, and no boy would have left so dull a book there after discovering its uninviting contents. Habit asserted itself. Leaving the Complete Gardener on the desk, he turned to the shelves for more congenial reading. Hardly had he done so when a sharp rap sounded behind him, followed by the rustle of paper. He wheeled around. The quarto lay open. Instinctively he sought a natural cause. Only a strong wind could have lifted the heavy cover, and though he accepted that explanation for a heartbeat, he was too candid to keep it. The night wind outside was slight, the sash closed and latched, and decisively the book's back, not its edges, faced the only quarter from which a draught could strike. He bent over the open page. Without knowing why, he read the unfinished sentence at the turn. At dead of night he left the house and passed into the solitude of the garden. He read no more, nor tried to discover whose midnight wandering was described, though the habit singularly resembled one of his own. Turning away, he paced the length of the chamber, wondering at that which had come to pass. Reaching the far end, he began to turn, but heard again the rustle of paper. By the time he faced round, the leaves had stopped moving, and the book lay open at another place. To be sure he was not deceived, he read the line now offered. The author, following a common practice of the time, had cast plain speech into biblical cadence. So dig, it said, that ye may obtain. The flippancy displeased him, yet roused his interest. He meant to read further, but was not allowed. Before his eyes could pass beyond the line, the leaves turned once more, revealing only a tailpiece and 5 concluding words. To the north, an ilex. These 3 passages, unrelated, meaningless, tangled themselves in his mind. He caught himself repeating them in different orders, beginning now with one, now another. Reading became impossible. He would endure no further unaccountable experiences. Blowing out the candle, he returned to the moonshiny bedroom, put on outdoor clothes, and went downstairs to the garden. Night walking in the garden often sent him back to bed refreshed. The easiest exit was through the study, whose French windows opened upon a short flight of steps. Pausing there, he admired the lawns, silver white in moonlight. The city clock struck the half hour after midnight, and aloud, he scarce knew why, he repeated, "At dead of night he left the house and passed into the solitude of the garden." Solitude indeed. The screech of an owl and now and then a distant train emphasized the silence. He wondered what Vicar Whitehead, who had bought the close of land for quiet and privacy, would think of the railways. Turning northward, whence a whistle had sounded, he saw a tree sharply outlined against the sky. His breath caught, not because the tree was unfamiliar, he knew all his trees, but because it was, to the north, an ilex. He braced himself and set off to make his usual circuit, which began by passing the ilex. He did not pass it. Reaching the tree, he made a disconcerting discovery. His gardener, punctual as himself, never failed to house every tool at day's end. Yet there, under the ilex and casting a sharp shadow in the moonlight, stood a spade. His second thought was relief. After the extraordinary events in the library, real or not, something commonplace would be soothing. He decided to carry the spade back to the tool house. The soil was dry, the surface a little frozen, so he stepped off the path, took hold of the spade, and found it as immovable as the tree itself. First with one hand, then both, he tried to raise it. The spade would not move. He blamed the slight frost and was about to leave it when the words from the Complete Gardener seemed to utter themselves aloud. "So dig that ye may obtain." Independent will deserted him. He grasped the spade it now yielded and began to dig. 5 spadefuls and no more, he said. "This is all foolishness." 4 spadefuls he lifted, spreading the earth before him in the moonlight. Nothing unusual appeared. He hardly knew what he expected. Coins, jewels, buried documents. He disinterred the 5th and last spadeful, and something emerged, not sensational, yet certainly not ordinary. A bone. Even by moonlight he recognised it as human, the radius of a forearm, cleaning the soil from it with his thumb. The presence of a human bone might seem alarming. Mr. Batchel took it calmly. Recent excavations in the church had turned up many bones since gathered and reverently reburied, and an earth-stained fragment was easily overlooked among the spoil carried to the garden. He felt more glad than shocked. Here was something practical to do. Reinterring such remains had been his constant care, and he decided at once to restore the bone to consecrated ground. The moment was opportune. The curious were asleep and he wakeful. Spade in hand and bone in pocket, he went to the churchyard, where by moonlight he found soft earth, and in a few minutes had laid the relic decently at a depth of 18 inches. The city clock struck 1 as he finished. All the world seemed asleep. Slowly he returned the spade to its place and felt the welcome desire for sleep steal over him. Ascending to his room, now dark, the moon gone, he lit a candle and before undressing entered the library. He had an irresistible curiosity to see again the passages in John Evelyn's book that had so strangely shaped the last hour. In the library a final surprise awaited him. The desk where the quarto had lain was empty. The complete Gardener stood in its place on the shelf. And then Mr. Batchel knew he had handled a bone of William Whitehead, and that, in answer to the long-dead vicar's own entreaty, it had been put back to rest. The end.